here on this last lecture, we're going to be talking about the modern Middle East. And I put up these pictures because I thought they help kind of show stereotypes or and contrasts that we kind of relate to, and others not so much. Here is a Lebanese musician. She's very popular singer. I believe she is of a Christian background. Her dress is controversial within the Arab world, but at the same time, excuse me, she's a popular pop musician, and she exists as a reality compared to women here in the middle, which are wearing kind of like burqas or niqabs, their head coverings that are thorough, right? And this is kind of what we expect to see, and this is like an more extreme version of Islamic dress for women of being modest. Many Muslim women just simply have a head covering. And then here, this is Israel, and we have a man dressed in an old medieval garb. We have a girl dressed very modern. She could be from Portland or Modesto. And this girl, she has a head covering. Most likely she's Orthodox Jewish, but she could also be Muslim, right? So there's all these different varieties. And then we have here modernity and buildings up in the Arab world. Again, not necessarily things that people think of or associate with the modern Middle East. So I just kind of want to break up the idea of certain consistencies that you might think. So we're going to move on then to some, just like the post-colonial Africa, I'm going to have to be very brief on very important events, some of that which you've sort of went over with me already. Gamal Abdel Nasser, very important character in modern Middle East history. Nasser works his way up in the military, and he comes to power. He helps take the Suez Canal from the British in 1956, and he does this to liberate, his country from what he thinks to be the exploitation of what is an Egyptian property, so to speak. France, Britain, and Israel get together and attack Egypt to get it back. Now, surprisingly, in one of the rare moments in U.S. history, the U.S. Under President Eisenhower is opposed to them doing this for various sets of reasons that may have not necessarily been moral, but or ethical in terms of like the main concerns. But the U.S. president came down very heavy on France, Britain, and Israel, and this was really a time, coming at the end of World War II, that the U.S. had the ability, that meant something, and in fact, they had to acquiesce. Actually, I'm going to go back for a second. This also made the U.S. president very popular, and so, it just kind of shows you that the new role of the U.S. that in Egypt there was an attempt already to kind of push back, in a post-colonial Middle Eastern era, imperialism by Europe. And here we have this rare moment, and when I say rare, keep in mind that the top military aid recipient of the U.S. government right now is from the U.S., and we've been for quite some time. So this is a rare moment where the U.S. president actually sided with, an Arab government as opposed to European and Israel at the same time. All right. So here's some significant aspects of modern Middle East you should know about. The concept of Pan-Arabism and the United Arab Republic. Nasser had this vision of, we have the United States of America, and you think about it, it's very weird that an Alaskan who doesn't even live in America, but really attached over into Canada, would actually think of themselves as a member of the United States of America. Well, he wanted to create a United States of Arabia, so to speak, United Arab Republic. Syria actually joined, and in the middle of all this, the king of Iraq was assassinated. There was a popular sentiment about creating a unified Arab political system. Um, and I'm just going to kind of skip some of the topics I have on here and talk more about this. Um, so Syria and Egypt emerged as one country in a hypothetical from the short period of time. Um, but a military coup in Syria ended it because basically many Syrians felt that it was just Egypt dominating Syria and then calling it like one unified form. But there was this vision, there was an attempt by the Arab world to do something new politically, to address some of the problems they had in the post-Ottoman, post-colonial era. What I want you to also think about, though, is that these were ideas that were beyond Islamic visions of Islamic Sharia law or Islamic fundamentalism. Okay, and that's something almost we strictly see in terms of visions in the Arab and Islamic world, but here that's not the case. Um, a very significant war, which again some of we addressed somewhat in the Israel-Palestine conflict, is extremely significant. So remember when Israel was first created, if you look right here where my arrow is at, this part was simply Israel. The West Bank ended up being controlled by Jordan, and the small sliver of the Gaza Strip ended up becoming under the control of Egypt along with the Sinai. And so just keep that in mind for the moment. Syria's Ba'ath Party pressed Egypt into confrontation with Israel. There was still a lot of bitterness about Israel coming in, humiliating the Arab armies, and expelling the Palestinians. So there ends up becoming these border clashes between Israel and Syria, which you can clearly see how that would happen. And Egypt made a blockade against Israel. June 5th, 1967, Israel bombs Egypt's grounded air force in a preemptive strike that just devastates Egypt's ability to do anything. Imagine all their air force just bombed before they can even take off. And Israel has a striking victory that is almost more impressive than the 1948 war. And Israel took more land from Arabs. They end up taking the Sinai Peninsula. They take Gaza Strip. They take the West Bank, and that's how they get the military occupations of these two places. And then they take the Golan Heights from Syria, which they still have to this day. And so we're going to talk more about this in the next lecture and what this meant.